Hi, I'm Jared Lombardo, and welcome to episode 9 of the Conventional Podcast. My jobby job is as a software development manager at Tableau Software, where we build interactive data visualization products that help people see and understand their data. Each year, Tableau hosts a large conference for our customers that I help manage a portion of.
I am Jen DeLong, and I am the conference manager for Tableau Conference, which means I get the privilege of working with a very large team to ensure that we can plan every aspect of Tableau Conference and make it a unique and wonderful experience for all the attendees.
So 2 big questions jump out of that. And the first would be, what is the conference?
Yeah, so Tableau's conference really is for users and for our customer base to come and learn how to use the product, how to grow more in their careers, and how they can use Tableau. We really have prioritized learning in our sessions and what we do there as the first and foremost thing that everybody does. So we have typical breakout sessions where you can go, and we have people from Tableau speaking, and then we have customer sessions where our customers come and they speak about how they use Tableau or what problems they solve with it. And then we have our hands-on training sessions, which are sessions that you can come and we have typically about over 4,000 laptops on site and spread out between various breakout rooms. And you can come and really get that hands-on learning with the product. So they're walking you through tutorials and you're learning there in person. In addition to that, we have keynotes where you get to hear from Tableau's leadership about, the direction the company's going and innovations. And then we do a lot of other learning as well for attendees. We've created something new called Tableau Labs, where people can come and really get an idea of what's now and what's next in the future of the product. So you can come and hear about product features, talk directly to the developers, and then also really get a sneak peek or the chance to offer feedback on the direction and future of Tableau. So that's really the primary focus. And then the secondary focus of conference is to allow people to connect and interact with each other. So providing different ways, meetups where people can, attendees can meet their people, as well as connecting with our Tableau community. So finding out, after conference, how can you get involved in the online community or get support or connect with other people who work in your field?
How did you get to be in the place where you are managing such a big team for such a big show?
Well, I've been working in the field of events for about 20 years now, which is kind of scary. I actually decided in college I wanted to go into events. I kind of heard that from somebody that they sounded fun, and my first role in it was an internship with a company who did registration for Microsoft events over the summer. So I did that and then was lucky enough to find a great job out of college where I worked for a marketing company for the tech industry. And we did marketing and trade show events in that realm. And then have continued on through the years working for a nonprofit, working for Boeing, for a PR firm, and even a healthcare system, and then landing at Tableau through a recommendation of a friend. And Tableau Conference just sounded like this amazing experience. Some of the events I'd done had been close to Tableau size, but not quite the scope of Tableau Conference, and got the offer and privilege to join the team. And after the first year, my manager left and they promoted me into the role for conference manager. And that's the very short, long version of how I got here.
So all the years of experience doing a lot of different things definitely lead into it. But what made you the right fit for even that first internship? What were you studying and how did you sell yourself to break in at that early level even? Funny story is I was a competitive figure skater growing up. And so it was very much practice, 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 and show. And I think that still kind of translates into the thinking of what I do now is practice, 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 show for a week. And so my mom is very organized and she taught me those skills. And so I think that really being able to break down a project and really kind of be able to see long term of different steps and how to get there was just something I'd learned since I was a child, to be totally honest. And so in college, I was majoring in communications and with the intent actually of going into events. So I, had some of the right education background, and that first internship, I think it was my junior year, or going into my junior year of college, the summer before that, I literally opened up a phone book, and because the internet was not quite as robust as it is now, and looked up companies under event planning and just started calling them and asking if they had any summer positions available. And this company actually had a summer position available for the internship, and I was lucky enough that they, brought me in for an interview, and I had kind of that right ability to sit in front of a computer all day and code registrations into it, and and then eventually they let me come on site and work some of the events at registration as well, and the ability to easily understand the processes that went into an organization and the software system that they used at the time. So it was a lucky entree, because I do think it led to my first job out of college.
So at first you were mostly working with like conference vendors and then companies directly, or?
Yeah. So that first job, yes, they were a vendor for Microsoft, and specifically focused on registration. And then my first job out of college, I worked for a marketing company who does marketing for tech industry groups. So one of the funny things that I worked on was the industry group that were creating the standards for USB technology, which didn't exist at the time. So they had all the different folks in the industry contributing together and trying to figure out what the standards and write the requirements for USB ports and portals and how we would use those. And so I got to do the marketing events for that. So we went to different trade shows. We would organize the board of directors meetings. We would do a lot of marketing and stuff that the trade group needed to be able to get members and get support to develop some of these industry standards. So that was the first job that kind of led into event planning. So I got to do kind of work with the whole gamut, from vendors to also all of the folks within the tech industry of the major players at the time.
So your experience has all been in a larger context, like a bigger company, or have you ever tried to run your own thing?
Well, I did mostly it's been within the context of another company. While I had some full-time jobs, I did some part-time consulting on the side. So I would do work for other folks. So through another job, I knew some of the folks who'd worked for the PR firm for Vandenberg, or for Pearl Jam. It's called Vandenberg Communications. So I got to do some side work putting on some benefit concerts that Pearl Jam did. That was really fun. I tried out wedding planning for a minute and realized that was not the right niche for me. So did that. And then I also worked in the nonprofit world for a while in events. And so I did quite a few contracts for, galas and golf events and some different fundraising events on the side, but realized I enjoy working in the bigger context of a company. So that was something I kind of tried out on the side, and then decided that wasn't going to be my long-term game.
You've mentioned enjoyment, and you mentioned not enjoying the wedding stuff when you tried that a little bit, but what do you actually love about doing the work? What keeps you excited?
That's a good question. I love, I think, two primary things about it. One is being able to see this thing that's a vision and all of the different pieces that go into it, small and large, and see it come together and come to life, even if it's a day or if it's, like Tableau conference where it's over 4 days. And the other piece of it is I like working with a diverse group of people and with a diverse group of people contributing to the project. And so at Tableau, one of the unique things is that our employees play a major role in not only the planning of conference, but also working different positions on site. So it gives me this great, I really enjoy being able to see all of these different people contribute in, so many ways that some of it I don't even see till I'm on site or hear about after. And I think that's a really cool thing to be a part of.
What are some of the things that you've done in your years managing the Tableau conference that you are most proud of?
Most proud of? I'll pick three things. One is, I think, over the past 3.5 years that I've got to work on the program, is creating within the events team, who are kind of the core planning team on it, creating some processes and ways of working where we're really getting to the point where we're working as a team and in it and collaborating together. And I would never say it's a well-oiled machine because every year is different with new challenges. But I think really that team building and process building to take something that has Tableau's conference has grown, and so the needs have grown, and being able to tap into the strengths of the people in the team and how we can work with that growth. I think that's one thing. Another thing is some of the creative things that we get to do at conference and trying to be a catalyst. And, those ideas almost never come from the events team sometimes, but they often come from people outside of the events team or even some of our customers, and being able to help those come to life in really unique, interesting ways. One of the things was in 2015. Someone came to us and said, we want to do a flash mob to, oh my gosh, I can't even remember the song right now, but it was a popular song like at the time that all of the kids were doing this funny dance to. And we thought, oh my gosh, I don't know, like it seems fun, but how do we pull it off? And it was so fun because some of the people within Tableau like re-recorded the song and rewrote the words all to about Tableau, and then they choreographed a dance and we sent it out to employees and to our partners. And it was one of those moments where I was like, oh, this is going to be terrible or it's going to be awesome. And it was really awesome, and everybody had a fun time being a part of it. And so I love being able to take risks and cultivate those kind of just fun, funky moments that you don't really think of as being typical conference. And then I think the final thing that I would say I'm proud of is, last year prior to conference was the shooting in Vegas, and our conference there was one going on at the time, but ours was really the next one after that. And we had to make a lot of changes to our event because we were at Mandalay Bay where the shooting happened, and we had to be very cognizant of the crisis. And I was just really impressed with how Tableau's leadership team, how the events team, and how the employees and the whole community of attendees who came, how they really handled it, what their attitudes were, what they said, like how gracious and giving they were through donations. And I think, just to be a part of that and really see people come together in a time in a crisis of something that can be pretty terrible, but handle it with a lot of grace and integrity was a great thing to be a part of.
Well, so in response to the crisis of that shooting, and you were already there, I believe, by then, and doing the planning on the ground for our show. What kind of things did you have to do? Like, did you actually do differently in that time frame?
Well, we had to do a lot of things differently, to be honest. Thankfully, our security plan was pretty robust, so we worked with Mandalay Bay and with local police to make some adjustments that were really more just precautionary than anything else. We had to change venues for our party location, which is no small feat, moving something you've planned for over a year in 7 days, but we were able to do that. And, and then really working. The primary thing, though, those were a lot of pieces. I think the primary thing was working with the team and deciding what was the right thing to do and how to communicate to the attendees about it. Was the right thing to do to keep conference going the next week? Was it to, maybe scale back? Was it to not have the party? Was it to do all these different things? And again, I think how leadership decided to handle it and how they really listened to what we were saying, being there, on the ground, working with the folks at Mandalay Bay. I thought everyone, really handled it to the best that we could have within those circumstances.
Yeah, it seemed to go very well in such a short turnaround, so that worked out. Compared to most of the other shows with people I've interviewed so far, the Tableau conference changes venues almost every year. Why is that, and how do you just be prepared for a new place every year?
Yeah, I envy the people that are in the same place every year. It's so much easier to plan. Tableau Conference has grown exponentially over the years. And so a lot of the reason that venues have been changing is basically trying to keep up with the growth and finding venues in cities that have availability for our growth projections on that. So honestly, a lot of it has come out of something that's really great, which is the growth. And that's really a lot of it. Planning in a different venue, let alone a different city every year, it is a huge challenge. Especially when, you're at the point that Tableau is, it's considered what's called a citywide, which means you're taking over the whole convention center, and using every inch of space there. You're potentially using other venues, and then you're, for the most part, you have room blocks at most of the available hotels in town. And so, for example, 2016, we were in Austin, and that was a really particularly unique challenge because in order to fit for the capacity, when we had originally booked it, we had projected a little bit lower growth than where we ended up. And so we were just thinking, we'll be at the convention center and maybe a couple hotels. Well, as it, gets to be 2 years out, we realized that the growth is scaling. And again, this is a great problem to have, but to the point where we were maxed out of space far beyond the convention center. So we ended up in 9 different venues there to hold the show, which just creates a unique challenge in that people are not only just going from one building to another, but they're going across city blocks. And so you're now working with local police to ensure, you have people crossing. You're trying to figure out how to brand different venues to make sure people know, yep, that's the right Hilton that you need to go into for these sessions. And even just how you create the map of the space for people and communicate to the attendees, where do you go? What do you do? How do I find lunch? And those sort of things. So, and then in addition, the thing that I think people forget a lot is, the housing piece of that. So, in Austin, we had over 40 hotels that we had contracted room blocks with. And that's just a lot of contracts to manage and a lot of pieces to juggle on that. Another challenge that we often run into is having enough flights going in and out of the city that are, affordable for attendees. So that's something to look at, or even just having enough flights in general, especially when we send our employees, so many from Seattle, to work the event. Then the question becomes, are there enough flights to get into that city? So it really just varies from city to city, but it creates a unique challenge every single year when you're in a new space that you have to completely redesign your entire space plan, your entire event plan, all the way, through to things like flights and hotels and working with local police and you name it, different vendors in different cities. So it makes the job interesting and fun.
So you said that the cities are mostly picked by, what would have an available space, convention space and hotels and that sort of thing. But prior to the extreme growth, what motivated switching cities so much instead of, for instance, just having the show in Seattle or nearby where the headquarters are?
I think that in the early days, and this is a little bit before my time, so I'm kind of going from hearsay here, but Tableau really wanted to mix it up and see how they could make things different and make it fun for the attendees, and where would attendees enjoy going. What are the different cities, and then, what's available within those cities. So I think that a lot of culture of Tableau is exploration, and that was really a part of something that they were trying to do through the years. And I think that's something that has continued as we continue to grow. The number of cities and venues that can accommodate large numbers will decrease. And so I think we may see ourselves repeating at some cities and venues in the future.
In all these years of convention management, what are some experiments that you've tried that you either learned a lot from, whether they succeeded or failed?
One thing we tried was 2015. Actually, we tried a few things that worked and failed that year. We were at the MGM in Las Vegas, and again, we had more growth than we expected or had planned for when we booked the space. So we needed to create extra breakout session rooms. We didn't have enough using all of the space at MGM, and even some of the theaters that Cirque du Soleil performed in, we tried to use some of those too. And so we decided to try to take what was an unpaved lot at the time and work with the MGM to try to pave it and then build these massive tents. And then within those tents, create breakout spaces using pipe and drape and baffling and different soundproofing to try and make that work. It worked. We had sessions in there. I don't think that we would ever do it again unless we were in a dire circumstance and needed to. They were logistically extremely difficult. The setup had numerous issues with it. And then we didn't get great feedback from the attendees because there was a lot, no matter what you do to try to soundproof, it's hard to, replicate an actual wall. And so there was some sound bleed and, temperature issues and stuff like that. So I would say that was one where we learned that unless we really had to or came up with an entirely different way to engineer it, we wouldn't do that again. But one of the things, that did work really well that year, and we also got lucky, thankfully the weather in Vegas tends to stay pretty good, but we didn't have enough room for everyone to eat meals. And so it used to be that everyone would take a lunch, you'd have lunch from 12 to 1 and you could go get your lunch and sit down and eat. So we moved to all-day programming. So it was kind of, you would pick your lunch and you would skip a session to have lunch, or you would grab your lunch and take it into the session with you. So it kind of reduced the number of people that were going to lunch at one time. We expanded the lunch hour to, I think it was 2.5 hours. And this is actually something we still use today. And then we actually plexiglassed and built, we didn't end up plexiglass. I think we just built staging over the pools at the MGM Grand and put seas of tables and buffet tables out on all the pools. We used some of the indoor expo space that we had. And then we also used, there was a big driveway that we closed off that was typically used for bus drop-offs that we closed off and put tables out there as well for people to eat. It worked great. Didn't really have any complaints, and attendees could, kind of pick their lunchtime or where they wanted to do it. So we typically try to keep it a little bit more indoors if we can, just because of weather places, but we have moved to that model since then. It works really great.
So if at the MGM that year it had rained during the midday, what would the plan be? Because I didn't hear about that plan, I don't think.
The backup plan was we had the Grand Garden Arena, which is where our keynote was, and it had these really large concourses around the outside of it. And so the plan was between the time keynote emptied out and when lunch started, we would move everything into there and set up tables in there. And then people could also use some of the lower bowl seating of the arena. It wasn't a great backup plan by any means, but people would have been, they would have had shelter outside of the rain and a place to get their food.
Okay. Yeah, it's better than standing in the rain for sure.
Yes. Yes.
What are some of the things that you're most excited about either this year's show or future shows that you have in planning?
I think one of the things I'm really excited about, although a little trepidatious, is as we get bigger, we are going to grow out of being in one venue, and we need to start tracking our content differently so that people can maybe identify either a track they're going to do for a day, or, we can start co-locating things based on people's interest or levels of using Tableau, beginner, intermediate, expert. And so this year we aren't having to do that very much, but going into next year, we're going to need to start thinking about it, and then definitely for future years beyond that. So I'm really excited to see where that new challenge takes us, and how Tableau kind of reinvents conference again from that, with that in mind, and how it lets us kind of get creative and maybe look at sessions and the content that we're providing for attendees differently. That's one of them I think will be really interesting. Another really cool thing that we're doing this year that I'm excited about is, and we wanted to do something like this for a few years and hadn't found the right tool, but is a thing called Brain Dates. It's a company called E180, and they have a tool called Brain Dates, and it's a tool that you put in the app where you can go in and sign up for a topic and connect with other attendees one-on-one. So it really allows for these one-on-one peer-to-peer connections. You can also do group brain dates, which are up to 5 people. So someone could suggest a topic. Maybe it's how I use Tableau in event planning or something like that. most of our attendees wouldn't do that, but let's say that was me, then somebody else could go into the tool, sign up and look at it and say, oh, that's really cool. I want to meet, with Jen. And then we find a mutually agreeable time. And then we actually go to this Brain Dates location on site where, people will come in and say, hey, Jen, go to table 10. Jared's already there waiting. And then we get to meet and we get to talk for a half an hour and make those really great connections that hopefully will extend beyond conference and allow people to do that networking that sometimes is hard. It's sometimes just difficult to do that organically and make those connections and get into a topic that maybe is covered in a session, but you want to get deeper, or maybe it isn't and you want to talk with somebody more about that. So I'm really excited about bringing that into conference this year and seeing how the attendees respond and use it.
Yeah, I can see that being a very valuable tool as the show has grown so much. Like in the past 7 years, I think it's been a 10x increase.
Mm-hmm.
You can't meet everybody at dinner.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. But it is kind of that challenge of, growth is great, but how do you maintain some sort of, and intimacy is not the right word, but how do you make people comfortable and how do they just not feel like a number in the crowd? How do you let them connect with a friend, help them connect with a friendly face that they can then sit down for lunch with, or, oh yeah, I'm going to this session, I'll see you there, that kind of thing.
Well, along the lines of keeping the experience consistent or trying to be sure that you're providing a good experience, are you tracking customer data in ways to know, what kind of feedback are you using to keep the show good every year and make it better?
We use a lot of different feedback. It's a good question, and I think it's something that we're really learning year over year from. So it's one of those things where you never feel like you have it dialed, but you're doing your best. So we do surveys, of course, so attendee surveys and then surveys of all of the sessions. The session data we found is really, really helpful. It gives us a great idea of was that a good session that we should consider repeating for future years, or was the content, this type of content works for our attendees. So that survey data has been extremely helpful, as well as our just overall attendee survey of, the value of conference, and then, understanding, things like food and beverage, what did they appreciate or not appreciate. And we get a ton of comments and we read all of the comments, and there are some common themes that will come through from that and that we really do use and make changes. For example, last year, this is a really simple one, but people had a hard time finding enough water, and we heard it over and over. Unfortunately, we didn't hear it enough on site to make the changes then, but we did hear it in all the feedback. So this year, we're really making a concerted effort to have it, signaged and make sure there's enough all over the venue. I think we had enough last year. It just was hard. It wasn't in the obvious places it needed to be. So that's kind of a really simple, easy thing. In addition to that, we really track who's going to sessions and how many and how full they are. So what, when we look at, okay, this X breakout session or X hands-on training session, who is it that was there? What's that audience demographic and what's that breakdown? And then how do we kind of analyze that data and make sure that we, again, can cultivate content for future years that meets those needs or that helps us understand, okay, this is where the analysts are going, or this is where our business users are going to these type of sessions. And, we need to create more of one thing or another. In addition, we have started, and we just did it very loosely last year, and we're going to try and do a little bit more, but is this idea of using Bluetooth data. So most of the badges have a chip on them, and this is no mystery because you can see the chip on the back of your badge. But again, of tracking it in key places of conference, and so we can kind of see crowd flow, which helps us planning logistically and just what people are doing to help us, again, kind of say, oh, okay, this seems to be the trends. How do we make that work or flow even better for them the next year? As well as, when we look at some of our things like Tableau Labs, where we're really talking about the product in depth, who is it that's going there? And we can even follow up with some of the people after about their experience. And again, some of the follow-up we do from that is used in, focus groups and things that actually help change the product, not only just the conference. So that's really helpful as well.
Back when you were talking about the Austin show and then a little bit about the issue last year with people not finding water, what are some of the things that you've learned and used to make the signage better and improve the wayfinding? Like, how do people know they're in the right place kind of stuff?
I think one thing we learned by don't rename stuff. We tried that one year and it was really confusing because all the venue signage said something and then our signage said another. So always call it what the venue calls it. We really take the learnings from last year and map it out. So again, because we're in every venue every year, we don't get the, oh, this worked, we're just going to tweak this for the next year. We have to redesign it every year. So even things like how big the font is on something and if you can read it from a distance or how high it is, like making sure that you can see that over the person who's 6 feet tall walking in front of you and some things like that. So those type of things. We do a lot of walkthroughs for flow. So we actually will map out where we think the queue lines are that are going into a session room. And we will walk with our signage map and we will walk through the venue and say, okay, we're going to have people queuing up on the left to get into this session. Is there enough room for 500 people within 10 minutes to walk through this hallway on the other side of that? And when I get to the end of the hallway and I stand there and go, I need to get to room X, is there a sign that tells you how to get there and where would be the best place to put it? So we do a lot of literally physical exercises with that. We also rely heavily on the venues as well as our vendors who create our signage plans and things because they often have people who have worked in the venues before or work in them on a regular basis who can provide some good input on what has worked for other shows.
Do you spend any of your time like attending other shows just to learn from their practices?
Yeah, when we get the opportunity to, we definitely try to go to other shows and, snap as many pictures as we can and try to put ourselves into the attendees' shoes and really kind of look at what's working and what isn't. And we definitely try to do that in new venues as well to see, again, some of those flow things and what those like clog points and things could be in there, as well as kind of maybe what the venue's strengths and weaknesses are for different pieces of things, food and beverage and stuff like that, and get an idea so that we can proactively work with them on that as well.
One thing that the Tableau conference has that none of the other shows I've ever been involved with does is just such big parties. Not just like the number of attendees at the party, but like so many things going on, so much food, so many performance stages and what have you. How do you make that happen? And I guess why is it important for that to happen when otherwise, everybody's there to learn?
The parties are important because it's part of Tableau's culture. It's part of where we get to showcase our culture and brand and who we are. It's where we get to thank the customers, really. It's really a customer appreciation party. Like, thank you for being our customer. We want to show you a good time for 4 hours on a Wednesday night. And so it really is kind of that celebration and that chance to let loose. I think a lot of relationships are forged within that environment that maybe couldn't or wouldn't be in, a classroom environment. And so with that, when we're looking at creating the parties, again, as we get bigger, it gets harder to be more and more unique, but we like to find unique venues that have a kind of a variety of things or opportunities to create activities for people to do. We like to really have that idea of like creating spaces and activities that allow people to connect and to interact with each other. So, typically Tableau would never do a concert that's in an arena concert because everyone is just kind of more passively sitting there, enjoying it, as opposed to, I think that in Austin in 2016 was such a great example. I mean, we had a roller skating rink that we created in an expo hall where people could do that. And then we had an arcade area for the folks who maybe, want to game but don't want to have to, really listen to loud music or whatnot. We had an outdoor area where you could play different lawn games, and it had kind of picnic benches. We had a few different stages that year where you could hear different types of music. When we pick artists for our parties, we really try to pick maybe someone that you would discover, maybe didn't know very well, or you hear the name and you Google them, you're like, who is that? And you're like, oh, that's a cool song. Yeah, I have heard that song, but that have a really great live performance value that you're there and in the moment. You're like, that was awesome. I'm really glad I got to see that show. So we don't typically go for the big headliner names. We kind of like to say it's a little bit more of the indie festival circuit style. And really, again, just creating experiences and moments for people to connect and remember. And when they think of Tableau, they're thinking not only of all the things that they've learned, but this really great time and experience that they had at the party.
How should listeners contact you if they were interested to hear more about anything?
I'm on LinkedIn, so that's definitely an easy way. And, if you want to email me at Tableau, I'm happy to talk to folks. I always love connecting with other people in the conference industry and hearing what they're doing and having that. So my email address, jdelong@tableau.com.
Thank you so much for your time, Jen.
Thank you. This has been fun to talk about this.
Show notes and a feedback form are available at conventionalpodcast.com, and you can reach out to me on Twitter at conventionalpod or by email at conventionalpodcast@gmail.com. Please let me know if you have any comments about the show or suggestions for guests. Thanks for listening.